Hi, everyone.
Hi, everyone.
Welcome to another weekly chat. We're so glad that you took time out of your busy schedule once again to join us for this weekly get together.
Yes, we're delighted that you are here. We hope you have your cup of tea or herbal brew or other warm beverage. We are Tamara and Twila. We're a mother-daughter team. We have a little shop called Good Earth Gatherings just south of Lawrence, Kansas, where we have herbs and antiques and gifts and all kinds of unique items, as well as classes that we also provide online now. So, yes, we hope that you'll check us out. And we're open the first 3 Fridays and Saturdays. We'd love to meet with you and chat about some of our favorite things and what we're thinking about seasonally as we moved through the year. We're very much both gatherers and both very much trying to live in tune with Mother Nature and with the earth. And we like to share that with you.
And we're glad when you comment and when you share our little weekly chats.
Yes. And all of that helps our algorithm. You know, Facebook makes it kind of hard for small businesses. And the more likes and comments and shares that we get, the more that other people are likely to see what we're doing as well. And so that really helps us out. So thank you for that.
As I come up through the meadow at the side of the woods between your house and mine, I came up to the shop today so we could do this video. And I happened to think of Mr. Rogers and his little saying or his little song that he would start out with, because I was feeling that in my heart.
Oh, it's a beautiful day in the neighborhood.
Absolutely.
Right?
It is a beautiful day in the neighborhood. It is a very pretty day. And of course, in May, I think the days are just glorious.
They are.
We do go from cool to hot, and it's kind of the gateway to summer now.
Yeah.
But all the flowers are blooming yet. You know, the trees are pretty much done blooming, I think. But we've got a lot of flowers blooming, and that's always nice. And everybody's going to the garden shops to get things to plant, and that's what this month is really all about. Now, tomorrow is the full moon of May. When we plant our gardens, whether it's flower garden or vegetable garden, we like to plant it by the phases of the moon. And I would like to have you indulge me just for a minute while I read a little bit in my book about the moon, because I can probably read it better than I can explain it right now. And so this is the full moon in May. You know, many of our ancestors in our earliest, the pioneers and the ones who came before us, they had several names for the full moons of the month of May before they could keep track of time, before calendars. And when it was time to plant the garden, or when they planted their crops long ago, or when the storms filled the skies and when the flowers were blooming across the land, they named the May full moon. Well, if you were going to name the May full moon, what would you name it? Well, it's called the full flower moon.
Perfect.
It is perfect. And it was because all the plants seem to be blooming at the same time. Everywhere, the prairies, the meadows, and the gardens are colorful and fragrant. How appropriate these wonderful names were given to the month's full moon to identify this time of year. Storm's full moon could also be called raging sky full moon, if I were to, because I understand that the storm's full moon I understand it very well, because we live in the Midwest, and you know what happens in the Midwest. We have storms, and they gear up in April and they come in the May. This is the month of booming thunderstorms with torrential rain, high winds, and sometimes hail and tornadoes. The planting full moon is for those of us on our knees on the earth planting gardens, and also the farmers tilling the earth in the fields, planting the crops of wheat, oats, soybeans, and corn. The wise old women, our grandmothers, taught us to never plant on the day of the full moon, but to rest instead. Also, to watch carefully the waxing and waning of the moon, the increasing and decreasing light, and the gravitational pull of the moon energy, which affects every living thing. This sage advice was passed down through the generations, and I remember it as I plant my garden in this planting moon season. When I used to talk to my mom about planting a garden, she would ask me, "Now, did you plant it on the right side of the moon?" She called it the side of the moon, because there is a light side and a dark side. To many, this is viewed as myth and folklore, but there's actually research and truth in it. We were taught to plant seeds from the dark of the moon to the full moon, and then gather and dry and preserve from the full moon back to the dark, which is the new moon. At new moon, or no moonlight, the lunar gravity begins to pull water up and causes the seeds to swell up and burst open. The increasing moonlight creates balanced root and leaf growth. It is the best time to plant above ground annual crops like beans, spinach, lettuce, and other above ground producing food. In the second quarter, half dark and half light, the gravity pull is less, but the moonlight is still strong, strong enough to create a leaf growth and to establish strong plants. So I plant the vining plants like squash, cucumbers, and also tomatoes. After the full moon, as it is waning, the energy draws down and creates more moisture in the earth. The moonlight is decreasing, putting energy into roots. So it is a good time to plant perennials and root crops like beets, turnips, onions, carrots, and potatoes. In the third quarter of the moon, it is a time for pruning and propagating. The fourth quarter is a resting period for plants, a time to cultivate and harvest. And so, one of the other things it reminds me of this time of the month is making full moon tea. Now, this is something I explain in my book how to do. It is a fun thing to do, and I like to put the herbs into the jar of water. It's like making an infusion, but I set it out on the earth at night of the full moon or the night before, the night after, as we consider those the full moon, and let all the moon beams go into that and create energy in that jar for us to drink the next day. And one of my favorite things to throw together, and you might say concoction, is I will go out and gather a handful of lemon balm. I will gather a sprig or two of spearmint and maybe a blooming stalk of lavender and maybe a rose. And I'll take some of the petals off and put it in the jar also with filtered water. And I set it up on the earth and I gather it the next morning. And then I can drink it for a couple more days. But I bless that jar as I put it out on the earth. And it is so wonderful to drink on a hot day in May. And we will have those this coming weekend. Yeah. So this will be a perfect time to make my full moon tea. Although I don't have lemon balm completely growing enough to take from it, but I do have other things I could throw in it. Also, being the National Herb Week this week.
That's right, National Herb Week this week.
It is, and so it's a perfect time to go to your favorite garden shop and buy some herbs and put them into the ground. Yes. And a few herbs that I must have in my garden are the lemon balm, roses, a rose bush at least, lavender, spearmint. And spearmint, now you can put that in a big pot if you want to, if you don't want it to get away from you. But I have mine planted in a back area where I can let it go if it wants to. And it doesn't really. It's just pretty good. I do mow part of it off once in a while, but otherwise it's great. And then I also will have chives in my garden because this is the time of year I love to start making my vinegars. Chives is a good one. Garlic chives and onion chives are both chives to have in one's garden. Do you have any that you want to add to that?
I would just say, lemon balm, like you said, it's not quite ready yet because in the spring, until the hot weather comes, it just tends to taste not quite right. And then once the sun really starts beating down, then it just gets absolutely delicious. And it's really an herb that we serve it in the summertime here. And we constantly. Yeah, we recommend that, even if people have never grown an herb before, we say start with lemon balm because it's something that you will love. It's beautiful as a landscaping plant and it's delicious and easy to use.
And two of the things I'd like to add to this, I don't pick my herbs until between 10 and noon of a day because that's when the fragrant oils and the flavors come up to the top of the plant again. It just makes them better. They have much more flavor. And then the other thing is that you might see that I talked about spearmint and chives. Now, some of those could be termed invasive. Even lemon balm could be termed invasive possibly. But I don't think there is such a thing as an invasive herb because they can be controlled. And like chives, you clip the seed heads off. It's just a matter of us being attentive to the plant and doing what needs to be done when it needs to be done. Lemon balm, I will use it up until about middle of July. And I have cut it down to where it's almost 1/3 tall, 1/2 tall. I water it good and I have a second flush of wonderful yummy leaves to use. And then I don't let it go to seed. And that's part of it because I keep using it. And these herbs are made to be used. Now, I don't have the whole plant sheared off. I might leave 1/3 of it because that gives it the energy back down into the plant. But other than that, it's just a matter of being attentive to these plants. And they love the attention. And so this time of the year is also when I am thinking the fairy gardens need to be made. Yeah. And I normally always have one fairy garden, either sitting by my front porch door or out in the regular garden right down on the soil. and with a little few rocks around it. But they're easy to make, and it's a beautiful way to say hello to guests coming to your house, because they see that and they stop right there, and that's where they just don't meander much further. They love looking at all those neat little things. Fairy gardens are magical, and we teach that to children. And also it teaches them how to care for the plants that they put into a fairy garden. The world of make-believe is a wonderful thing. We don't want to lose that. And it's important to teach the children the world of make-believe, because we all have to have that in our lives. A little bit of magic is good.
Well, and I think, magic isn't necessarily even make-believe. I think magic underlies every part of life. And I think it's so important for us to recognize that and to honor that. And I think that's, to me, what fairy gardens do, is it honors that magical, mystical part of life that, we don't have all the answers, and we love to think about the fae and the fairies in May. It's just a magical thing, and it's enchanting, and it does help us to keep that inner child in us alive and awake as well.
I'm so glad so many of you replied back and liked the little wood spirit that I made, the little figure. And she's coming out of the woods. And of course, May 1st is when they start appearing, coming out of the woods or wherever they've been hidden for the winter. And now is the time we start looking for them, especially on a moonlit night.
Yeah. Did you know that actually hawthorn trees, which are, they're actually native and introduced to all of the United States, it was actually said that the day that the fairies returned is the day that the hawthorn blooms.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah. So there wasn't actually a calendar date. It was the day the hawthorn blooms. That's the day the fairies return. So I love that.
Which must be around May 1st.
Yeah, it's very close. And well, because hawthorn is actually called the tree of May. It's called May tree or May blossom. Yeah, it's a beautiful, wonderful tree, although it does have really long thorns. Yeah, thorns can actually be used as needles.
Yes.
Which is pretty impressive. But it's called hawthorn because of its thorns and because the berries are called haws. They're haws. So that's why it's called the hawthorn tree. And it's one that we love and we use as herbalists. I crush some of the berries and put it in a couple of our teas. And it's actually part of the rose family, which I just absolutely love. Mother's Day is coming up, and a lot of us moms might get roses or rose bushes, particularly for Mother's Day. So if somebody's going to buy you a rose bush for Mother's Day, our kind of rules for getting roses are they need to be fragrant. That's first and foremost, because that's when they contain the rose medicine. So make sure if you're asking for a rose bush, ask for a fragrant rose bush, because so many of the modern roses are not fragrant, and you never can really go wrong with a David Austin rose. I'm not sure if any of our local Lawrence nurseries carry those. I know Suburban Lawn and Garden in Kansas City does carry them, but yeah, that's a wonderful thing. But anyway, back to the hawthorn tree, a relative of rose. It's a tree of both magic and medicine. So just as we were talking about magic with the fairies, the hawthorn tree is also considered to be a magical tree and a medicinal tree. It's long been associated with fairies and the fae and protection. So people would even put hawthorn branches, and they decorate for May using hawthorn branches for both protection and to celebrate May and to welcome the fairies back. And I was going to say, just welcoming the fairies back. I know we were talking about this the other day. I have little bells in my garden, and they're just there. They're there to welcome the fairies, to call in the fairies. And it's fun to think about ways to welcome the fairies in any way that we can. Another piece of magical lore with the hawthorn is that sometimes a flowering hawthorn branch would be placed in a craftsperson's studio or workshop, and it was considered to bring them more skill and more success, which really it's a neat way to use hawthorn. And there's a little bit of magic
inspiration.
It is. The leaves and the berries and the flowers all taste good. They're all really rich in phytonutrients and antioxidants, and we can use them all to make a tea or an infusion or a tincture. And really with hawthorn is the kind of plant medicine that is wonderful used over a long period of time. And so I try and use it in a tea that we drink almost daily. And so that way it helps with vitality, helped boost our resiliency. And as part of a daily ritual, it's wonderful to really help us to age well and to have healthy hearts, especially. Hawthorn is really considered to be a heart herb. Really, of all of the herbs, a heart herb I always consider to be hawthorn. It helps us to bring balance to our heart function. It
Mm.
helps to support heart function and to strengthen our heart function. I think I've mentioned this before about hawthorn, but in China, they consider the heart to be what they call the earthen vessel of the Shen, and the Shen is our individual spirit. And so when the heart is disturbed, our Shen is also disturbed, and that can lead to restlessness, anxiety, insomnia. And so hawthorn is also useful for those types of things as well. And it's also considered helpful for ADD and connective tissue disorders, as well as many other things. So we love hawthorn. It's definitely one that we use in our teas, and we sell it at the shop, both the organic berries and the leaves and the flowers as well. As we're thinking about spring, we're also thinking about the bugs are returning and multiplying, and that's not a bad thing. We don't like necessarily mosquitoes and ticks, but bugs are so very important for all of the whole system,
Yes.
right? The whole ecology of planet Earth starts really kind of with the plants and the bugs. And so we also want to acknowledge, though, that they're not always fun, right? Especially the mosquitoes and the ticks.
Yeah.
So we wanted to talk just briefly about our bug bite relief roll-on that we make out of plantain tincture here at the shop. Plantain is a wonderful herb. We'll probably talk more about it in an upcoming session, but it's a great antitoxin, antivenom, and cellular healing herb. And as a tincture, it really helps with relieving bug bite issues. That's something that we now have out on the shelf again at the shop since it's spring.
It's the season.
It's the season. 'Tis the season.
It is. So I hope that this week that you can get out and enjoy the garden shops, and pick up some flowers and some herbs and veggies to grow in your garden. And remember, when we talk about planting a garden, we really talk about maybe a flower garden, or maybe a fairy garden, or vegetable garden, whatever your heart desires.
Or all. Interplanting all of those together
Yes.
is a wonderful thing to do. Your garden doesn't have to be all one. And I think there's a lot of benefit to interspersing, some of the flowers in with some of the vegetables. And that can sometimes confuse the predatory insects as well.
Marigolds with tomatoes.
Exactly. Exactly.
Truly. And I think I'll leave you with this quote: "Where flowers bloom, so does hope." And that was by Eleanor Roosevelt. And I will leave you with one more. And that says, "If you would be happy all of your life, plant a garden."
I love it. How true.
And so until next week, have a great week.
Good earth blessings.
See you then.
To you.